that?
I'd like to encourage the parking approach that we go line by line through this book too. That's what I like.
For next time. I've done that in the past, and we will not do that. All right. So any other questions? So again, just clarifying questions so we can get through the materials. That would be good. And I know there are a couple of spots here where we probably will have some clarifying questions, or may have some discussion if you're looking for some guidance.
Definitely.
Happy to do that. All right, so I'll
Thank you.
turn
Great.
it over to him.
And I just want to start with a thank you, because Tom and I couldn't put this together without the people that you see in front of you, and Jackie Garvey, who is behind me here, who always has my back, literally now. Because this is quite an undertaking to do, and so we hope that the presentation is clear, and we look for your feedback. So this slide looks familiar because we had presented this last week. We are right now in that very first dot of presenting our budget. We have a long way to go between workshops and board meetings and district hearings. And on slide 3, I do like to start with our value statement. I won't read it to you, but it guides every decision we make, as do our expectations, our school-wide learning expectations. As you know, this is what we try to build, a fiscally responsible school that still holds to our values and meets our learning expectations. Tonight's presentation will be in 3 parts. It's actually 2 parts tonight and 1 part that continues over. One is to give you some data that informs our building, how we built the budget. And then look deeply into our budget proposal of 1.23%, and then that will be followed by budget workshops. In our budget drivers, we have many of them. We've identified 6 of them. I think the ones that are most significant and stand out in our minds as we went through this work are number 3, maintaining quality and choice through a declining enrollment, and also looking at our academic, social, and emotional needs for our students, and that includes the courses that we offer our students. We shared the decision-making framework, again on slide 7. We've shared this before. Every decision we make, we come back to this framework. Are we meeting the safety needs of our students first? That's always our first and foremost concern and responsibility. And then we look at those legal graduation requirements. Can we get all of our students through all the courses they need to take? And so on down that line. And looking at financial impact, not that it's the least significant, but all those other pieces have to be in place before we can feel comfortable saying, here's how we can look at our budget. These are our updated Prouder projections. We found that they've stayed fairly accurate. I think at any given moment, sometimes hour by hour, you can ask Paula who are the new registrants, who is withdrawn, who is, but they're pretty accurate. You could see we're at that red line, and we will be reducing a little bit before we start working our way back up. So this is our proposed budget. It's a 1.23% budget. It represents $24,429,537 with a variance of $296,423. That's a negative 4.55 increase or decrease in Reading and a 9.08 in Easton. We have another slide that, I think before we get there, Tom is going to speak a little bit about why that 1.23% is significant. So just to give some background into the budget.
So tonight we're just laying out for you the budget. That's our goal. We want you to have time as members of the board and the public to look at it. We are going to stay with the presentation as it's put together at so what we're going to call 1.23. But earlier this evening, the board elected to remove $60,000 from the budget. So that's 0.25%. So you're actually looking at less than 1%.
0.979.
0.98, yeah. So what I'd like a minute to do is to help those of you who are new members understand what numbers we put into the budget. So we're used to, on a monthly basis, Scott walks us through the budget object summary, right? There are 64 different elements in the summary, and we found that it's a good way for us to look at the budget because it can be all-inclusive. So I've done nothing particularly clever other than take this budget object summary, and I've put it into clusters, and that's your tiny print handout for members of the board. What I want to show you is when you take the full budget and you add it up to the proposed $24,429,537, most of what we asked for comes back to the costs of human resources. Salaries, benefits, insurance, allowances for substitute teachers, tuition reimbursement, the stuff that it takes to pay for the people. And you'll see that in this budget, that comprises 66.3% of the total request. We also are going to take a look with you at academic programming. So that's, once you've got the teachers squared away, it's everything we need to make the classrooms function. Textbooks, supplies, materials, and so forth. And then there's the costs of operating 108 acres and this big building. And what I want to ask us to think about is, when I take these three numbers, the 16, 2, the 520, the 1.4, that adds up to $18,126,637 out of the total $24 million. It's 74% of the budget. But that's not the whole budget, obviously. All costs related to transportation are $1.944 million. That's the daily transport of the kids. That includes athletics, special education, field trips that we build into curriculum. 1.9 million. It's not easy for this team of people to say, I know, let's save funds by taking money out of the transportation line. They really can't do that. The same is true for outplacements. The cost of placing a student either at another local education agency, an LEA, or at a out-of-district private placement, tuition, which is offset by excess cost reimbursement. And you'll see when you go into the budget, because of having fewer kids to place out who become eligible for excess cost sharing, we're actually not going to receive as much money in the coming year. So there's another 1.3 million that is not subject to us making fungible. Then debt management, and this is the part that, am I in the line of the camera? I want the community at large to think with us about this. You hear $24,400,000 to run a high school, but because we're a regional high school, we also service our own debt. And Scott will have a timeline to share on that with you later. But out of the $24,400,000, $2,372,000 is debt service. It's again not something this team can go in and say, let's get more effective, let's get more efficient. And then finally, your cost of central office, which is listed here at $697, but of course is going down by $60,000. So you have, if I just take the forced changes of transportation, outplacement, debt management, and central office, that's now it's $296,000. That is pushed up in the cost of the budget that these guys cannot impact. So the fact that they've managed a budget that is bringing you an increase of $292,000, I think that's pretty extraordinary. And what we're going to present to you is the impact of the right-sizing work and how that has driven the formation of this budget. As Gina showed you in a previous slide, in the year 13-14, we had 1,068 kids in the building. Next year, we're projected to have 831 kids. So how does staffing impacted by that reduction of several hundred kids? And that reduction, as you know, of enrollment will continue. Just the last thing, and then back to Gina, is when we presented 2 months ago on the ongoing work of understanding right-sizing, we shared a list of courses that had fewer than 15 kids enrolled in it. And I think someone in the public decided that's because we're going to cut every single course that has fewer than 15 kids in it. That's simply not the case. You're going to see some reductions proposed tonight, but it doesn't mean that in weighing all the balances that we're not going to be offering, say, AP Calc BC. Those are decisions you'll have to make on enrollment requests and program validity, and as you said. You'll see some other reductions that aren't entirely driven by enrollment requests. So we want time to walk you through that tonight. So when we talk about how is this group managed, they've taken all of the cuts that they have, mostly out of human resources, and then out of program and operations. Operations is down again. And there's not going to be a lot there for you to look at. Academic programming is up by 0.1% because we need to buy, JT, new chemistry textbooks. That's how tight the request change is. So the rest of it is, how does the staff reflect the size and the reach of the student body? So back to Gina.
Thank you. So we thought it would be helpful to look at Region 9 referendum results. I think mostly because some of us have been in education long enough, we remember budgets that were 6%, 12%, 11%. We haven't seen that in a long time here. So you could see our regression line is toward lower budgets as we go forward. The 1.23 in red is what we're proposing. And you can see our budget has gone up and down over the years. So this is a slide on apportionment. We're on slide 12 now. A lot of numbers on this slide, and Scott could help me out since he provided a lot of this, but basically what we're looking at here is we know the budget will impact Reading and Easton in different ways. Some of our education is how could more students from Reading be in our school, and yet Reading's portion of the Barlow budget is down from what they paid last year. And it has to do on the screen with those red arrows and green arrows. We have 40 fewer students from Reading and 21 more students from Easton than we did in the previous year. Scott checked our math, and that looks like in an actual budget change, what we're proposing at our 1.23% would be a decrease of 632,962 to Reading, and a plus 929,385 to Easton. It's big numbers. Keep in mind what Tom alluded to, when we look at what goes in our budget, we're actually looking at a 0.98 budget now, so we can have some updated numbers for you when we come back. So what's informed the work that this team has done? This document, again, another heady slide with a lot of numbers on it, we've seen before. This was a representation of our work in looking at just enrollment numbers and what we know. We presented this last month with our current projections in that first column, and then thinking out to 2021, where might we find enrollment-driven reductions. We get a little less confident as we move out, but what you can see circled are all of the things that will be reflected in this budget. So everything in red will be accounted for, and you can see a line through virtual language where we thought there would be no change, but we're actually recommending a change this year. And we'll dig into each of those individually as we go through.
Just quickly, can you just assure us, when you say FTE reduction of 0.7 in math, that's multiple employees, or that's one employee, and how does that affect retainage and that? Just, you don't need to go
When
through all of them, just say that it's all been considered.
I think when we get there, it's funny that you pick the math because it's an interesting one, but we'll get there. Can you trust me just one couple more slides?
It's fine.
Thanks.
Great.
Okay, so our key changes. What you could see in our 1.23 budget, there are some things we are adding to our budget. There are 3 items right up top. We'll remind you about the 1.0 FTE in bridge. And FTE, remember, is that full-time equivalent. And we're using FTE for the exact reason that Mike mentioned, that it might represent a person, it might represent 2.5 people. That's the work that our department chairs do. We know that with every reduction in FTE, we are saving a certain amount of money, and that will, I think, as we go through, be a little bit more clear. We're talking about adding a 0.5 FTE. This is a full person for reading. Patty and Dave shared that at their at our last meeting. That's for reading, to support reading. This budget does include 1/3 of the ER9 Director for Pupil Personnel, and we understand that we will adjust that and back that out.
Sorry, Tina, just, it came out a little misleading. The ER9 wants to add a full FTE, Orton Gillingham, that's a literacy reading specialist, to be shared, 0.5 at Barlow, and the other 0.5 split between the other 2 schools.
Thank you.
You're up to increased library.
We'll see some increases, an increase in our library para to full-time. We'll explain that in more detail. You were given a presentation about replacing our transition coordinator with a certified teacher. And we had some reductions that we thought were key to point at. A reduction in our substitute line, we'll explain that. Reduction in summer days for instructional leaders, DCs, directors, and counselors. Reduction in our counselor college visits. And then we have some eliminations. An elimination of our freshman girls and boys basketball teams. An elimination of the assistant coach for the ski team. We still have a ski team, but not an assistant coach is not needed. And an elimination of the student services secretary. What you see on the right-hand side of that screen are our enrollment-driven certified teacher reductions. It adds up to 4.7 FTEs, and we'll go through each one of those. All of those FTEs together account for a reduction of $373,649.
In salary.
In salary,
And
for
if I
certified teachers.
If I could also clarify, when we talk about navigating up and down in this budget, it's easy for people to slip into, oh, this must be what we're recommending, and we're not necessarily recommending some of these reductions. Our task is show the board a cost for the ensuing year, and then the board will ultimately make some decisions. But I do ask that we don't say, oh, Gina just recommended that we eliminate sports, because she's showing us a path. Of course, many of the things that are on there we individually or personally care about. And then it might help if Scott, if we could bring Scott into to a different practice. We are used to, on the board, to saying, oh, you're cutting a position. Have you cut the full load of that position? Have you cut out salary and FICA and life insurance and health insurance? And we're not necessarily carving out of health insurance. Do you want to?
Yeah, so this 4.7 FTEs represents fewer than that in terms of specific people. Of those specific people, actually, as it happens, none of them currently take our insurance, so there would be no additional insurance to include for them. And then the broader point, as Dr. McMorrin mentions, is in the scale of the budget that we have, our total medical budget, for example, is something on the order of $2.5 million, 2.4, 2.5. The individual cost for any particular person is in the teens to, say, 20K. So it becomes really a rounding error, basically, in terms of the aggregate. If we're adding a very, very large number or reducing a very, very large number, it would materially change that. But it doesn't in this case. So as a result, we have not included those calculations as a part of this.
So let's dig into what some of these reductions may look like. So on this slide, on slide 16, we have put together a library para increase and a substitute line decrease. Let me explain where we got that. Right now, when our teachers are absent for routine illness or a family illness day, these are not long-term absences, these are the daily absence, we hire a substitute, and that substitute supervises students in a classroom. The teacher leaves plans, the substitute supervises the students. What we're proposing in this shift is that we supervise students, and they're supervised by Barlow employees. So by bringing the library para up to full-time, we would have 2 full-time people in the library and 1 certified FTE that's split because that person also teaches classes. And the library would be that hub. As you can look around, we have classrooms off the side, we have seminar rooms, we have another room here. Our substitute line then would be reduced because we would not hire daily subs for absences, for teacher absences. Students would be directed to either the library, which is where we are now, or Commons, which is what we call the cafeteria when we're not eating in it. The students would have work to do. That would be given to the students electronically through Google Classroom, maybe through email or some other online platform the teacher uses. And students would be supervised, but they'd be supervised by Barlow staff as opposed to having a substitute come in a classroom. This is something we've spoken about before. We've polled the faculty. With our enrollment going down, this is actually an opportunity, we think, to better meet the needs of our students. What happens sometimes now is we might have, we average about 3 absences a day, and we might have 2 substitutes. So sometimes a teacher's classes are covered and the lesson is given, and other times students might be sent to Commons. It happens about 3 or 4 times a week where classes just go to Commons and there's no lesson plan for those students. So we actually think that this is more educationally sound because the students, if this goes through, the students would know where the plan is, the teachers would know the students are responsible, and we'd have certified people and Barlow staff supervising those students. We know it may require a transfer from the certified salary line. So right now, we have teachers who may be out long-term, and they're out on FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act. So they're not drawing a salary, but we're paying for a substitute. So we have not, it has not been our practice to transfer money over into the substitute line. We also have something called breakage, and that is when we have a teacher who may retire, may resign. We can hire someone at a lower rate, and that money stays in our salary line. So we can see, with only $40,000 in that substitute line, a couple of pregnancies and a knee surgery and that could make that line run over. And so that would be something we would want to keep an eye on. But it is a substantial, this is, if you look up in that upper left-hand corner, the net savings is $40,269. So it was a significant amount of money as we are trying to find other ways besides just taking FTEs to do that. So something for you to consider. Do you want to stop at each one and see if there are any questions, or?
I have a quick question, which is,
I think we can move through it. Yeah, go ahead.
you're comfortable, so students will not get any instruction when the teacher's not there. They'll be self-learning, which again is fine, but I just want to make sure you're comfortable, given you say average 3 absences a day. What happens during flu season when you have 7 and you have a PD day scheduled where you're pulling teachers? Are you going to be able to handle that, or is the plan then just to hire a few subs just to get through those tough days and move forward?
Yeah, we also cover another way too, Mike. We cover with our own staff. So I know Paula has already been exploring with her staff of those PD days when we know ahead of time. Perhaps that might be a great opportunity for the counselor to come in and deliver their counseling curriculum with classes. We sometimes cover internally with instructional leaders, with department chairs. And so we may find ourselves in that position.
Thank you.
We have, I'm on slide 17 now, and this is a position, a student services secretary. There are 2 people that help manage in the counselor office. We have an office manager, and then we have a student service secretary. Eliminating this position would mean that we would have to shift some of those responsibilities to other people. Again, I want to repeat what Tom said. This is not anything that we want to do, that we like to do. We look at $18,800, and again, we're trying to maintain programming as much as we can. So it would mean other people in the school would have to step up and complete some of these necessary tasks that this person does.
Right, so maybe it'd be timely for me to point out, since Alan Fossbender, Cicchetti, Josephsberg, McMorrin, the approach has been that the budget presented is greater than the budget that the board lands on. And the logic from Alan was, anytime you're shopping, you get to see more than you ultimately purchase. What we've done this year in each of the 3 districts is say, our goal is to get you right down to the neighborhood you're going to get to anyway. So how does Gina and this team manage to bring us at 1%? They said, some of these things on the table are stuff that is tough for them.
Thank you. Okay, and then we get into the enrollment-driven staffing. We broke this up into different slides just to make it a little easier to have a conversation, also easier to go back to. So we'll start with virtual language. If you look at that list that I gave you a few slides ago, we're actually starting at the bottom and going up to the 1.0s. In virtual language, due to enrollment, we know we can eliminate 0.2 or 1 section of virtual language. It would leave 1 second. So currently, we have 23 requests. 7 of those requests are for rising juniors, and 16 of those requests are for rising seniors. Historically, we've always run 2 sections of virtual language. But with 23 students, we believe we can run 1 section. The savings would be about $17,523. We go on to the next slide, which is Latin. When we look at Latin, again, we see our way to eliminate 0.2 FTE due to enrollment. It would leave 1 section. And there's some options that we can do here. So we can run 1 class of Latin combined levels. That would make a class of 18. If you take a look at those 18 students, 4 of them are rising freshmen. So those are 4 students that are currently in the 8th grade that have said that they wanted to continue in Latin. Because when the counselors were there, they encouraged anyone who wanted to take Latin to take Latin. They also asked students to pick a backup language, so all 4 of those students do have a separate language that they would study if they couldn't study Latin. The rest of the students represent students that are currently enrolled in the high school right now. 9 of them are rising sophomores. They're in Latin 3 and Latin 3 honors. 4 of them are rising juniors in Latin 4 and Latin 4 honors. And we have a rising senior who is in Latin 5. We would recommend one of the models that the board could consider is running one class of all 18 students. We could not offer Latin 2 and just run the course for the students at Barlow. The board can also decide to run 2 sections of Latin as we do now and have a beginning Latin for Latin 2 and 3 and then a Latin 4 and 5 course. Those of you who have been on the board before know you get a staffing document. In order to prepare that staffing document, some of these decisions will have to be made or at least given advice to our department chairs who then have to staff those sections. So that will be something that we might want to come back to when we talk about it.
I can't ask a clarifying
So say,
question.
do we want a little bit of discussion, clarification on Latin, because then it's a topic we've had for a while.
I have a question. I believe virtual language and Latin, that's the same teacher, right? So essentially, if in either option there is a net, because I think we also talked about the potential retention issues, right? Because there is a smaller cohort that the person is teaching in addition to the person teaching in JRMS, right? So is there a risk there? And I guess also just shifting the enrollment here. Are there any students in either the virtual lang option or in Latin that will have to be in a waiting list? Or is this, do we know that this is pretty much the population we're going to get?
This is pretty much what we have. This is the population. We have taken all of those requests and incorporated them here.
And so
What
the
we
only-
might see in the shift is if we didn't offer a course that we thought we were going to offer, those students would have to be shifted into other sections. You'll see some of that happen later on in some of the sections. We might not know where those students land, but the students who selected virtual are in virtual, and they all have a slot. And there's room in that course. I think Jen Damaris is not feeling well, so she's sorry she's not here. But she said when she taught it, I think there were 25 and, yeah. So there's some room, there are some seats there if a student changed his or her mind.
Right now, there are no conflicts, because typically, particularly with the juniors and the seniors, if they have other electives or things that they want to specialize, any sense yet, Paul? You don't have
Conflicts is where Paula lives. Paula lives in the
It's the staffing
conflict
document,
land.
right? Okay,
In
So
terms of conflicts, we can't answer that now.
okay.
And we've had students this year conflicted out of a semester of Latin, and we have had an online program, another way for that student to study, to do an independent study, and then jump back into Latin. We will see that, and we need to be flexible in looking at it as well, because we'll have students conflicted out of courses as our numbers get smaller, and we run these singletons, this course only offered in this one period.
There is, I'm going to distract us a bit from the current year budget, but just looking out, extra years, if we only have the 8th grade cohort in JRMS and no one from the Easton schools coming in for Latin and virtual language, because essentially they're together in my mind, because it's the same person teaching it?
No.
Not
No, because
necessarily?
any other people could pick up virtual
Any-
language.
Oh, okay.
Any world
Yes,
language
any
teacher
world
could
language
take the
teacher
cert.
could
So you
pick
won't,
up virtual.
okay, so you won't create a vacuum of potentially 40 or 50 students because of a change, okay, thanks.
Want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so, Question number one, we will be getting the staffing document before the next budget workshop as per is customary?
This is a very tricky budget to staff, so it is going to be in pencil because you'll see as we go through, when you're talking about taking out tenths of teachers, those students have to go somewhere. So we can give you our staffing document now is in many different places. But our plan is to be able to present it on March 5th, which is when we normally present that at the first budget workshop.
Right.
We always say it in draft form. It's going to be in very rough draft form.
So if we get it before the first
The first
workshop on
budget
the
workshop,
5th,
that's what I
in
see.
draft form.
In draft form, as long
Before
as
the
we
5th.
all are agreed
Yeah.
that it is in draft form, because some of these decisions will impact other decisions.
And then question two, so when counselors encouraged current Latin students to take the course if they so desire, was there any forewarning that it may not be there when you're a senior that may have discouraged some of those students away from taking the course? In other words, was it kind of, you can take it, but at your peril, we're not sure how many years it's going to be in? Or was it, these are the only 4 students that really are interested in the course?
We said if you want to take Latin, sign up for it. If you sign up for Latin, we also request you pick another language, and that was a directive that we were given. But nobody was told that this is terminating in 3 years. We have no idea. So we did not have that conversation.
Okay, I was just curious.
Also encourage parents during our program of studies, that's when the 8th graders come to the high school with their parents and look at an overview of our program. And we said several times at that meeting, if your children are one of those children in 8th grade Latin and they want to continue, please have them sign up.
I guess, for this, are you looking for any guidance from the board now? Otherwise, we'll consolidate our questions and bring them into the workshop on the 5th.
That's
Otherwise,
fine.
if
I think
looking
what
for
you're
some
going to
guidance
see,
now, we can
right,
try and provide that. Otherwise, we'll just stick to the clarifying questions and then come back and discuss it.
that's fine. And the way we'll create the staffing document is based off what you're seeing in our presentation. So, but then if anything
Yep.
changes, we'll have to adjust the staffing documents. Okay.
Okay, great. Anything else on Latin?
Well, I'm still a little confused how I would think that the different models suggested would cost different amounts.
There's a staffing model matches what's in here.
No, I guess what I'm saying is one class with all 18 students as opposed to one class with just Latin 2 and Latin 3, or 3 classes. In other words, there are different.
Right.
But this is what they modeled.
Right.
Class with
Right.
18.
So what Dr. Penn is saying is, if the board elects to run 2 periods of Latin, you'd be running it for these 18 students. You'd have 13 kids in the Latin 2/3, and you'd have 5 kids in the Latin 4/5. But it would mean restoring the $17,523 to the budget.
Okay, but we reduced Latin by .2 previously, correct?
There were 2 sections of Latin currently running.
There used to be 4, 5,
There used to be 4.
right?
There used to be 5, right? It used to be a full,
So we've reduced 3 sections
Over time.
over time,
Yeah,
to where we are now.
right.
at 2 sections.
This year you're at 2. This budget presents 1.
This budget presents 1 section.
Mike, Gina's proposal is to reduce the .2. She's just saying, as the board, you have the option if you
No,
wanted to, right?
Yeah,
But
no,
you
I
could-
realize that. I'm just trying to understand because I thought we were running a few sections, but we're just running 2 sections and we're proposing going to 1 section. And then in that 3-year moving out, we're considering running 1 section for 4 more years?
No, that's where we're gonna need the
That's where we'll
board
need the
to
board's
weigh in
guidance,
on this.
right.
That,
Well,
Right.
I'm just saying that's, that's the elephant in the room, is that we have to really kind of figure that out now, because it's hard to make a decision without knowing what the end game is, if that makes any sense. So I'd be curious as to what the recommended end game is in order to be able to understand how we're getting there.
I think that's where I would look to the board as you're looking to us. So the model as I see it is if we offer the rising freshmen Latin, and I'm going by what the curriculum committee advised and the board reiterated, which is if a student is in the program at the high school, we want to honor that program right through. So if we have the 4 students, rising freshmen, continue in Latin, then yes, you're looking at a program. Now, the board would have to decide, will you have a full-time teacher if you only have 4 students, if you have 3 students? Will we look to other online ways of delivering that content? And that's where we look to you for guidance in what you'd like to do with the program. Because you could keep 2 sections. You could have one section, you could have one section of 18, you could have one section of 14. There are many different iterations, and we could dig into more of what that looked like at a budget workshop, but those are about the ways to slice it.
So with respect to the 4 rising freshmen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought there were about 8 or 10 kids in JRMS that are currently taking Latin now,
Well,
and then
there are 12.
There are 12, and there's no one else behind them because, for different reasons, right? And then that board.
Eliminate the
So of the 12, only 4 select the Latin at this point.
Right, and that is fairly typical from the past few years. We had 10 and 5 signed on, and not all 12 of the cohorts have followed through.
So then, doesn't that answer Mike's long-term question, in that if the 4 are the only ones of the 12 that are taking it now, or that want to take it next year, then who's left in 21 through 24?
well, that's why, let's not perseverate on this tonight, but
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
where we're gonna want
That's where you need our
you
guidance.
guys to make a decision, because it could well be that, so remember, historically, you almost never get a kid from Easton taking Latin, because JRMS was offering 4 years, and the Easton kids felt at a disadvantage. But if you look the year after next, where you'll have 8th graders who'll say, the Eastonites might say, well, Latin 2 is really going to be starting off at the same place. I won't be coming in 3-4 years behind. You could see a resurgence, because you take that proportioning of the student body, you're getting fewer and fewer kids from Reading. You still have a majority from Reading. You're getting more and more kids from Easton. That's going to continue for 4 or 5 years. So why is there a staffing issue? Let's just contemplate for a minute that these numbers were all doubled because you were drawing from the entire Easton Reading pool. So it could be a resurgence. But I think what the administrators need you to think about with them is the board going to say, no matter what, we get down to 1 kid, we're going to have more than 50% of a Latin teacher to teach that kid, versus what are you weighing other costs for? Is there a number or some other criteria at which, and then I think the challenge back to the administration is to say, well, let's contemplate this. At some point, you have 4 seniors. Do they get direct instruction in the classroom? Do you seek to provide them independent study? Do they do local college course for credit? Can we bring a professor of Latin to do something Latinate that may or may not warrant credit? But this administration needs some guidance from the board on how long your view is and what you want to do. You're going to see other slides where you're saying, in order to get this number down, freshman sports has to, in effect, pay for itself. So there's going to be balancing everywhere. And I commend this group of teachers by not getting into turf wars. They're really trying to fairly distribute the impact right across the whole program.
All right,
Move
so
forward.
again, for any clarifying, because I think, obviously, this is gonna be a much longer discussion at the first budget workshop. So I think, again, if we've got any specifics that we'd like to cover in there, otherwise, I think this will be a longer discussion, later, and we can get through. I don't, if you have any other clarifying questions that you need answered right now, well, we've got the group, otherwise, let's move on.
I'll fire them at the hook shop, I guess.
You could also go back, Mike, to the enrollment, the slide with all the numbers and circles, and you could see the projection of when the program would end if we kept reducing. So you could see that. All right, let's move on to wellness. So wellness is, due to enrollment, a 0.5 reduction. The average anticipated class size would be about 24 to 27, something that is high, but that we've seen before we could tolerate. Our elective programs run, and that was very important to us when we were looking at this. So it would be a 0.5 reduction. The savings is $29,712, and that has to do with a teacher who is part-time that would come back full-time, and the junior teacher would then be reduced. That's the 0.5 FTE in wellness. When we look at Spanish, again, we can see a 0.2 FTE reduction here. It would mean a very large class size for one section. So in the old days, when we weren't trying to find every penny, we may have entertained the thought of running 2 sections at 14. Right now, we're saying we'll do 1 section at 28, and that will mean we can reduce by a 0.2 FTE there.
One section
Of which Spanish
for,
level?
for what?
Of
Because
Spanish.
one
Saying
section
that's
for the
one
whole
section that'll be
school?
high,
No,
the
no,
others
one
will be
one
average.
class will be high.
So there's-
The other classes will be where we accept them.
So the other class sizes will fall within the typical range, and one section you're gonna have to run slightly higher than what would be the norm.
Correct. When we look at English, we can see a 0.4 FTE reduction here. Again, we anticipate class sizes to be in the range of 22 to 26 students. See the savings at the top.
That's no reduction of offerings.
No reduction of offerings. When we look at art, we can see a reduction of 0.4 FTEs in art due to enrollment. It would mean that 40 to 50 students wouldn't get their first choice of electives, but we do believe we can guide them into open electives in other areas. We usually have students that don't get their,
We go to a wait list.
go to a wait
And,
list.
you know, we work through the wait list and try to get as many opportunities for students as we can. But we've been maintaining a wait list for the past 4 or 5 years. And so we always do, seniors get priority because they're on their way out and they need to meet a graduation requirement. So it is true sometimes that students in grade 9 may not get their first choice of electives.
The only thing I see with this is it seems like whether it's based upon student choice or not, there seems to be the appearance of a disproportionate reduction in students taking art, or in other words, we reduced an art teacher 1 year, and then we reduced an art section, but it was a STEM teacher, and the reason I question it is because it seems like our sports program participation is at all-time highs, or at least maintaining the percentage numbers. But so is that really what we're seeing, is that the number of students interested in taking these art courses has declined?
Our student population has declined. So we have fewer students that are, it's still a requirement. They take art. I don't know if the request, we had at 1.5 art teachers. We had 5 art teachers. So that was when we were at 1,068 students. So now with a 0.4 reduction, that would leave us with 2.6 art teachers. We're able to bring back and honor some requests like printmaking. We're able to still run our jewelry. Sections that might not run, a little soon to tell, but
I'm trying to make the best choice for the students that have them.
So we're
we can
making
workshop
difficult
that.
choices, because 2.6 teachers at 1068, and that would mean,
5.0.
5 teachers at 1068, and you're 2.6 now, and you're not at less than half, so it just seems like there's,
Disproportionate.
Part of the-
proportional change,
so that's
a
the-
shift there.
Right, and
all.
that's the history of course options too. When you had the 5 teachers, you were offering wet plate photography, which we discontinued. When we went from 5 down, we made some of those technology courses dual. It could be like design and, I don't know the names of the courses,
Imaging
but
and digital
imaging
photography,
that can
right.
be, part of the art, part of the technology.
I guess just for clarity too, does this mean, students interested in art are going to be, I guess, disproportionately impacted, 40 or 50 more students going on to the backlog, getting study hall and not actually getting art
Or a
classes?
non-art related elective, another elective that is non-art related. If it's a kid who can't take something freshman year and they take it sophomore year, that's one thing, because that's being freshman, right? But this is.
And I think that's why Paula, when she explained the wait list, it goes to the seniors
Of
first.
course.
So they're getting their choices and their continuation in a program, if that's what they're looking at.
But curriculum, I think part of that is exacerbated by the requirement to take Art 1 before a lot of the art electives. And I know we had talked about a couple of meetings where perhaps, and I think Stephanie mentioned the curriculum committee, maybe, probably not next year, but in future years, can we make the art courses at Helen Keller and John Reed, be some kind of pre-qualifying credit, so Art 1 doesn't have to be a prereq for, say, VO.
And that was something that we had brought up, that we would be exploring, because that could let us offer a wider variety of elective courses to meet students' needs and interests.
In the right sizing, when we talked about the right sizing chart the last time, the 0.4 FTE was equivalent to removal of 2 sections of Art 1, imaging, and 1 section of digital photo. Would that be the case here, or not necessarily?
I think that was more in theory. I think we would look at specific course signups and try to
We have more information now because we
align
know.
it with demand.
So we're building to the number rather than.
Right. Right. Moving on, we're looking at social studies on slide 25. By reducing a 0.8 FTE in social studies, our average class size is anticipated to range between 22 to 26 students. Again, when we get the staffing document and we workshop it in March, I think you could see where those classes may be.
I didn't ask this question before, but when we say average class size is anticipated to range, it's very fluid language there, so what I'd like to make sure is that we're not talking about, like, we're factoring in a push that has 6 students or 14 students, and then we have another history class that has 35, but it averages out to 22 to 26. Can someone just
Stole
please?
my question. I was saving
Where-
that for math.
I'm sorry.
I was saving that for AP
Can
Calc.
someone just clarify that we
stole her
don't
thunder.
have
Come up with the average.
huge classes, that when we say average class range is between 22 and 26, that we could safely assert that we won't have any classes that exceed 26 students? Or would that be
I don't-
not a fair
I wouldn't-
portrayal?
I wouldn't put money on it. I think that until it goes, till we actually look at the numbers and look at the documents, you may hear us say, when you look at that staffing document, that we want to run a class at a lower enrollment than 22. And that we just said we wanted to enroll Latin at 18. Well, if Latin is at 18, something else is going to go higher. If we're going to have, you mentioned AP US History. If we're going to offer that lower, and I don't have the numbers in front of me right at this moment, then it could be that another elective is going to be higher. So it doesn't always work out as neatly as saying, okay, the first grade enrollment, you can have 4 classes, you can have 5 classes. It doesn't always work that way. And we may be recommending to the board a low enrollment in one place and a higher enrollment in another. I don't think the people in front of you are going to recommend a class of 30-something or higher.
Yeah, and I guess that,
Staffing social studies requires 7 FTE.
Maybe that's a good way to, right. That might be a good way when we look at staffing document to, I know JT and Angela put together their budget that way. When they look at the request, they say they need a certain number of FTEs, and then they determine where those FTEs are going to fall.
okay, so we'll look at that. I think.
And we'll
again,
look at that
you know,
as we go
The
through.
concern
Yeah.
again is we're not running 40, students in a class or all the classes, and it's averaging out lower because of 1 or 2 lower classes.
Yeah, I mean, I would almost love to see if it's not, I don't throw a wrench in anything, but sort of, because we did pull out to identify the classes that we're running with low enrollment, and many of those we want to keep intentionally with low enrollment for various reasons. But it's almost like for math, I'd like to see, well, we have these 3 really advanced AP classes, and we're running one at 12, and one at 16, and one at 15. These are capstone courses, we believe in them. And I'd almost like that outside of the average, because I don't want the kids who are taking algebra fundamentals to all be pushed up into 29 kids because of that. And if that does mean we need an extra 0.4 to make sure that the I don't know, I don't want to throw a burden on
And
you,
I
but
think it's,
even if
again,
there's a
we
way
do
to sort of
trust that
sense
you're not-
this
That's
out.
the logic. That's the world they live in, yes.
Yeah.
And again, I think
That would be
it's,
really, really helpful.
yeah, I think it's a more concern, we're not saying that, yeah, you've pushed 50 kids in every class except for a couple, and that's what's skewing the average. We know you've got the best interest of the students
Yeah,
at heart, and you're not trying to
absolutely.
push them above 30 or whatever the
Yeah,
student number
no,
is.
but it's all about, a lot of it, people will cherry pick average class sizes and things like that out, and it's really important for us to be able to communicate that we do intentionally run some especially specialized courses small, because we value them and we need to have them.
There's no class running this spring semester with 30 or more students in it. I believe that's correct? Right, so you could have a couple of 29s, but if you were, maybe the board should say, show us the distribution. If you're concerned that you're going to suddenly see multiple sections of classes that are running 32, 33, 30, that's not in their model. They wouldn't be putting that out. The charge to them was adjust for declining enrollment, and not at any price. And I believe that Paula will tell you, it's really trying to place singleton courses that start to throw sections off. If I want to take Latin, whatever period we put Latin is going to have an impact on what those kids in the other periods have to take or can take. When you're running 18 AP courses over an 8-period section, you're going to have doubles there where people are going to have to choose between. That's more of the balancing act. But mostly we're going to be in the 20s.
And, I mean, yeah, I know you thought the language was interesting, but when we say anticipated, that is what is really anticipated based on student enrollment and staffing. Where that number can get a little skewed is, we might have the occasional class where I have to put 27 in, so we're above the 26. But it isn't that we're designing the scheduling to accommodate 30-plus students in a section.
Right, and we trust the staff, that's not the question. I guess One other request, I understand that some of these decisions are difficult and that ultimately it becomes, the onus of the board to make some of these hard choices, but what might be helpful for guidance, I know we've heard in the past statements like a science class with a lab can't have any more than 25 students based upon safety. What also might be helpful is, and I think teachers could probably do this very easily, to say a history class really shouldn't have any more than X. An advanced math class shouldn't have any more than Y. A language class maybe should not have any more than Z. It would be helpful just to know, because I understand there's going to be the rare occasions where you have these guidelines and then you're forced with, you said your recommendation was 26. Do you run a class with 27, or do you hire a new teacher and break everything up and run classes of 14? I understand that, but I think it would be helpful for the board to be able to see what those guidelines are so that we can kind of assure parents that that's one of the factors that's driving our decisions, that we're not just trying to stuff, 30 kids in the class, which I don't think we are doing, but I just think it would be helpful.
Which is one of the reasons we don't want the board to weigh in on anything tonight. You've been calling for years, show us what the impact is of reductions driven by enrollment decline, and now we want you to think about it, because you may not want to buy some of these, or you might want to buy back in the other direction.
The other thing, of course, to keep in mind is if we take all the reductions in the first year, looking forward, and that's something also to just keep in mind. Okay. We thought those other conversations were complex. The science vacancy gets a little complex. We have a vacancy in science. This is not enrollment driven. But we are not going to fill that vacancy in science, because really we're going to fill it with an enrollment in math, reduction in math. So we have existing cross-certified math and science teachers. It correlates with the reduction on the sheet that Mike picked out initially, the 0.7 reduction in enrollment in math. So the science vacancy will be filled with science teachers, but we do have cross-endorsed teachers. We anticipated in our declining enrollment several years ago, and we tried to encourage teachers to get that cross-endorsement. We've always had some people on staff. It's especially that math science seems to be very popular in that cross-certification. So they will be taught by science teachers, but the reduction, even though it is a science vacancy, is really coming from math.
So
Is that clear?
no reduction in program, we're not filling a particular
Not
role.
reducing programming, not, right, electives are running, yeah.
Class size is roughly the same.
Yes, some science classes have that 25 max, others don't. And so I don't think the class sizes when you were doing it initially, JT, or,
Right, we'll have a range there too. With the number of offerings we have across all of STEM, because we have so many kind of niche-y courses, we're going to have a wide range to begin with. But let's say I have 3 of a section, it's easier for me to push across those 3 sections and make that a little more equal. Paula does fantastic work just balancing courses too. So even when you see that range of like 22 to 26, she does a great job trying to make them all kind of somewhat uniform and make them all 24, right? So that's always, that's important work. But when we cut the staffing document and we say, okay, well, that 3 sections is at 2, that we're not looking to put 30 kids in a class, right? And if anything, I might have a couple numbers right now that are kind of tough where we might actually say, well, I don't know if I can run that many sections. We might have to constrain some enrollment, some choices with electives. So that's usually where we're going to go with that. But to Gina did a fantastic job kind of explaining a little bit of the subtlety there. Mike goes to pick up on the 0.7, because the 0.7 really is in math. But I don't like to call them math teachers teaching science, right? Because the state legislature afforded us this opportunity back in 2018 that teachers in shortage areas, right, or any subject that's a shortage area, teachers who have a primary endorsement already then sit and get cross-certified. So we have a number of teachers now across all of STEM STEM is a little niche too, because it's not like a social studies where it's, if you're social studies certified, you could teach any social studies course. If you're a science certification, it might be in biology, specifically in chemistry, physics, general science, or science. There's technology certifications. Math is math. Math is just the 029 certification. So it's kind of, it's been really helpful once the state passed that legislation for us to be able to tell teachers, hey, you know, are you interested in doing that? So we actually had a number of our colleagues, teaching colleagues, who took the opportunity to take those other certifications and now are eager and willing to do that. So it really helps us in this case with the vacancy that's in science, and allows me, we've had for years a colleague who's been a hybrid kind of math science, but certified in both, right? So that's very desirable for us, and in fact, any staffing or any hiring looking forward, that's very desirable for us, especially as our overall size enrollment decreases, and we still want to maintain a variety of program offerings. So it's really kind of the secret sauce to how we can do this.
Because it also lets us use our own people who know our students, who know our programs, and so I think that there's a real value in doing that. Okay. We look at our special education. This is a 1.0 FTE. We anticipate this reduction is coming from the 3E program, but we anticipate having to add this position back into the budget in 2024, 2025. This is some of the projections that Patty has put together for us over the years. We feel comfortable reducing now, but it's just something to keep in mind as we'll go back to that enrollment document. And we don't have special education on that long-range document, but we will put it on. It's sometimes a little tricky to tell, but we're pretty confident we could take the position now. We know we can do that, but then we'll have to add it back in. Then we move over to athletics. And in athletics, we have an enrollment-driven reduction, and that's the assistant ski coach. Mike can give you details, but we have added assistant coaches as our numbers went up, and then we pulled them out as our numbers went down. So in our ski team right now, we have a co-ed ski team, girls and boys. We would still have one coach who would oversee the team, but the assistant coach would be removed. And then when you move over to the other side, we have one sport, which is freshman, it's basketball, but it's freshman girls basketball and freshman boys basketball. It's the last of our freshman sports. We anticipate 10 girls and 14 boys. I'll let Mike speak to the freshman sports, because when I say it's the last of our freshman sports that's funded by the budget, other people and people watching might say, but that's not true, we have freshman sports. So do you want to explain how we can have freshman sports not supported by the budget?
Sure. Over the years, as, you know, going back maybe like 20 to 30 years ago, freshman sports were removed then, and we've never gotten them back. They haven't gone back into the budget. So what's happened is booster clubs have picked up the cost of various freshman teams. For example, field hockey every year picks up their freshman team. Boys and girls cross. This year we have 30 freshman girls coming into girls lacrosse. That booster club is planning on picking up all the costs associated with that freshman team. Now, in athletics, we still put together a schedule like we would for any other team. And sometimes we adjust it where we might have just home games, or depending on how many are actually in the program, one, and two, how much the booster clubs are willing to spend. But they'll pick up the cost for the coaches, they'll have to pick up the cost for the officials and transportation. In some situations, they'll also have to pick up the cost for, say, ice time or things like that. Okay, so obviously we were very, very blessed to have booster clubs that are dedicated and committed to our programs, but these are the last two programs that are within the operating budget, aside from freshman football, because of developmental reasons and requirements from the state, we got rid of JV football rather than freshman, so that we could run a freshman sophomore program. So we still have a budgeted freshman football program, but not a JV program anymore in football. So these are the last two, and projection-wise, going just based off of REBA numbers, we have 10 girls coming into freshman basketball and 14 boys. That's just based off of REBA.
So Mike, that means that I think that there's 24 and 27 boys and girls respectively in basketball now, but then that would be additive next year, so then we'd have 37 and
So
whatever?
there's 24 and 27. The boys made substantial cuts to certain levels, because there's only so many you could keep on every single level. And the girls made less. So I want to say the girls had about that number coming in this year, and they kept just about all of them. I think they cut 2 or 3 freshmen altogether. So, yeah, that would be in addition to, especially in, say, girls basketball, we have
No
no
seniors.
seniors. So that 24 number will now become 34, hopefully, coming into next year before they have to make cuts. But, and then the boys have 5 seniors this year, and then they have just 1 junior. So, they'll have 1 senior next year. So you'll see kind of the same thing for boys going into the year after.
So help me understand why this doesn't kind of turn into the most, I don't know, the sports with parents that are most willing to contribute gain the advantage over other sports. In other words, if you propose that we were going to reduce freshman football to save $745 a kid, or $17,000, the booster club would probably step up and say, no, we'll give you the $17,000, keep freshman football. But the freshman basketball, which is a different, and unfortunately, I don't remember the last time we won the state championship in basketball, though I could be wrong. I don't know, maybe we...
Girls 10 years ago.
Okay. I just, I don't know, I do have a soft spot for, this is not like last year when we talked about freshman baseball, and we said that there were not enough athletes coming in to field a team, which is a whole different issue. That's like when we get into when there's, not enough to run a class, which again is an awful thing to consider, but if you don't have enough athletes to run the team, is a different decision than saying you were, we're just eliminating freshman basketball because you're the last freshman team that's funded by the board, and unless Booster steps up, we're kind of cutting it. That's just...
I agree with everything you just said.
This slide, the right side of this slide and the next slide in its entirety are, the reason that they're at the end of the presentation is they're associable to declining enrollment, but they're not directly derived from it. And the task to these guys was show us the humblest number you can, how you're going about doing it, because we on this side of the table may not want to do that. So there's no is anybody at your table, Mike, from you to your right, recommending this? No. It's how the next budget-driven change would take place. Although the assistant ski coach is enrollment related,
driven.
right? And then the next slide in its entirety.
Yeah, this is again, looking at,
Wait, before we
Oh,
go there,
sure.
sorry,
We're
just
back.
back on the athletics. So this is a recommendation, though, for where we're at on the percentage. And if the
Yes.
board feels strongly about keeping it, since it's not enrollment-driven, that we can come back.
They
to the
could
board.
put it back.
Sure.
Sure.
Let's bring this back in.
Right.
exactly, yep.
So you have I guess you have a different kind of homework assignment, because in every previous year, it's go in and pressure test some number. Do you really need this? Do you really want that? I hope that what you're seeing when you unpack this is, if there's a dollar amount in there, they really need it. And so I think that should give the board some latitude to what do we trade? If we don't want to increase the amount, but we want to hold on to this, where would you take it from then? That's part of the exchanges. So this next slide.
Right, so we've talked before about our per diem days. These are days for extended summer work. Some of these days are contractual for our lead teachers, our instructional leaders, our department chairs. We want to be equitable in the pain we're all feeling and equitable in our reductions. So you could see our reducing, I put in what the reduction would be. So if we reduce 1 day from each instructional leader, that would leave them with 1 day. Normally, per contract, they have 2, one at the end of the year and one in the beginning of the year. Our department chairs and our director normally get 13 days. If we eliminate 1, that would leave them with 12. We've spoken about the work our counselors do in the summer, and at one point in our budget history, when we were trying to find those last dollars, we really decimated our counselor days. We built that back up to 8 days, which is where it should be. It's 8 days for 4 counselors, and then one of our counselors gets 16 days. There's other responsibilities that counselor does. We would reduce 1 day from 4 counselors, leaving them 7, and 2 days from 1 counselor, leaving 14. I wanted to give you a little insight into what goes on in the summertime. So the work includes, but it's not limited to, the closeout of the school year, very important as far as the text, the grades, the curriculum. Scheduling conflicts. Balancing is what Paula's life is over the summer. When students' schedules change as courses open and close, she has to make certain adjustments, and her staff does that as well. That often involves JT and Angela as the humanities people. Supervising the summer program, that really falls on our department chair in special education, David D'Angelo, and that also we have our meetings, our PPTs that have to take place in the summertime. We meet as a leadership team. We determine our school-wide goals. That ties into our district planning. As we shared earlier, we're getting ready for our NEASC evaluation. So we really want to make that process meaningful to us, and the work we're doing with right sizing, with visible thinking, vision of the graduate, all ties into that. We spend time in the summer analyzing student performance data, and doing that together as a group is much more effective when we can come together and talk about those aha moments. We do hire and orient new staff. We anticipate a new director in special education. That's going to take up a lot of our time, even just in interviewing. I think Angela's first year as a department chair, how many interviews? 12, I think, or some crazy. There were a lot of interviews coming back and forth. And then we have to open our school year. We do an orientation and a curriculum. If we're going for an ouch factor, this is the slide that hurts the most, just as far as the operations of the school. It saves us $10,813, but it's important work. And I think if we reduced any more than this, then we would really have to be sitting in front of you saying there are things that can't be done. And we know that from Paula's standpoint when she wasn't able to balance the courses and what that looked like when we had these very unbalanced class sizes. And even some of the balancing Paula does is gender balancing too. The computer just puts people in a class, but we try to avoid the classes with 20 male students and 1 female student, or vice versa. So she really tries to do that balancing. So some of these things are not just nice to have, they're really necessary to have. And so we just want to leave that with you. Another thank you to Jackie, who puts the budget together and enters it on Phoenix. Jackie is not going to be sad to see Phoenix go away. Scott, just letting you know, right? All of our department chairs or directors that are in front of you. Our budget proposal is 1.23, but if we back out that 60,000, it would be 0.98. And I will remind you of our
I'm sorry, Jean, let me just read the other numbers so the
Oh,
board
sure,
members
I've
can.
got them here too,
right.
yep.
So 24,429,537 becomes 24,369,537, and the variance of 296,423 becomes 236,423. Yep, and Scott, do you?
Yeah, just say, Scott, do you mind presenting a couple other options we can think about?
You can put that last slide up, Jean, I'm sorry.
Right, and then those are our dates of our next meeting will be March 5th, and we look forward to those questions. That will also guide us as to what we should come in and prepare for you as well. And we will have that pencil draft of the staffing document.
Then we have a couple other options for consideration to bring to the workshop. So Scott's going to tear our nose as well. No option for everybody in the room.
Is it all right with you, Tom, if I have the department chairs, everybody come up?
Yeah, unless, does the board have any other clarifying?
wanna keep it here?
Want to see what Scott has to share.
So,
Sorry, guys.
well, one other
Nice try.
question while we're on this. With this
Parking can go.
NEASC thing,
Yes.
with this NEASC thing, I would really like to see a number for somebody to come in and guide that process. I know we feel strongly that we want to do it in-house and everything, but I'm a little worried that we're going to end up where there's going to be gaps because people are focusing on the NEASC, and I would rather, especially when we're asking for, you know, kind of contracting our staff anyway, I'd feel more comfortable knowing what it would cost to have an outside person come in and lead that, rather than hearing down the road that there were challenges that we couldn't meet because we're allocating resources to do that.
You can have an
Which-
outside person come in, the work still has to be done by the people.
Well, I think we had a number like
We
10
can give
grand
you-
or something
let's-
for somebody to
can
come
work
in
on it.
and do
Sure.
that.
So let's put that in a question, and we'll get
That
that.
to put it in a question and we'll
Yep.
respond.
give it to Todd.
I just put it in a question.
Yeah,
well done.
It's gotta be in writing.
Gotta be in writing.
I think everyone, Scott can take us now.
Okay, so what you have in front of you is 3 areas for consideration where there is available funds that could be used to offset the 2021 budget. The 3 areas relate to the pension contribution, the health insurance reserve, and the debt service. So before I go into the specifics of these, I just want to talk a little bit about the types of expenditures that these are. All 3 of them are ongoing obligations that we have as a district. They're not period-related, really. So they're not, so when we put a budget together, it's an itemized estimate of what we believe is necessary to run the school district for that specific year. But these are not period-related. These aren't expenditures that are one-and-done types of things. This is not buying supplies. It's not buying electricity, those types of things. Our pension is an obligation that is a multi-year obligation. We have estimates that are provided and calculated for us that the pension committee reviews. But there will always be an obligation for us to support pension. Each year we make a contribution to it, and it's driven by that type of analysis. But it's not like we're buying a thing that has a specific dollar. It's an estimate of the amount that we think is necessary to support our pension obligations. The same is true for health insurance. Since we're self-insured, we're obligated to pay the claims that arise in any year. We come up with an estimate that's worked on with us and provided to us by our third-party experts. It's not a price tag to buy a thing. Similarly, in debt service, that's a little more discrete. We have principal and interest on bonds that have been raised in the past. Those have due dates. Those are specific items that are due. But it's also our option as to when we pay, particularly if we anticipate paying them earlier than originally scheduled. So the top sheet of this, I'll go through line by line. We can talk about those. The second sheet is the debt service related, and we'll turn to that when I get to the bottom of the first page. So if we talk about the pension, first of all, at the end of the 18-19 budget year, the board directed the expenditure of the 19-20 pension contribution from unexpended funds in 18-19 in the amount of $200,877. That amount remains unencumbered and unexpended in this year's operating budget. So if you look at the budget object summary in the pension account, which is $11,235, that number, $200,877, remains there as an unexpended amount. The 2021 calculated amount for the pension contribution is very, very close to last year's. It's $200,870. So the board could consider contributing the $200,870 that's in the 2021 budget from the unexpended amount that's in 1920 funds that we have. Timing of that, just so you're aware, that calculation of the $200,870 that's in your 2021 budget, that number is delivered to me in October. So this past October, I got that number. It is actually calculated as of last July 1. It is then forward calculated to next July 1 with an assumption in terms of interest. And the reason that that's done is to give us time to put that number into the budget cycle, and we then pay it in July of the following budget year. The reason I tell you that detail is that's a number that's calculated. Our ability to pay it is really at our discretion. It's an estimate of the amount that's owed in order to pay the pension obligations that we have. But again, back to my earlier point, we're not buying a thing. We're not buying a service. We're not paying a third-party consultant with this number for them to perform certain service hours that occur within a certain time period. This obligation is with us, and we have to pay it. Similarly, with health insurance reserve, the board directed all remaining residual from the 18-19, which was in the amount of $422,481, to be contributed to the health insurance reserve fund. That same amount remains currently unencumbered and unexpended in this year's operating budget. So again, if you look in the budget object summary, you'll see an unexpended amount of $422,481. Our estimated contribution to the health insurance reserve fund for next year is actually the same as this year. It's remained flat year to year. So in working with Brown & Brown, based on claims history, based on the amount that's in reserve, the recommendation was keep the amount flat. Again, that's an estimate of an obligation. Claims will be what claims will be. It's unknowable what they truly will be, but that's the best estimate from Brown & Brown. We have the flexibility to fund that from multiple places. So the board could consider contributing some or all of the existing $422,481 towards the 2021 amount and lower the 2021 amount by an equivalent. So then lastly, debt service. These are specific numbers. You'll see in your budget books that the 2021 budget is up $116,325 year to year. That's an increase in principal and interest that's owed compared to 1920. When we raise a bond and do not expend all of the funds on the project, we can and should use that available bond funds to pay bond interest as soon as feasible. So it enables us, in fact, I just refreshed this conversation with bond counsel today, it enables us to take unexpended funds and pay for bond interest, and in fact, it is strongly recommended to do so. And we have that opportunity in multiple ways in coming months and years. I would expect that we would have at least $116,325 in unexpended funds. That could be an opportunity again for the board to consider that. One of the main reasons for that is, of course, we raise a bond for a certain amount. We get paid a bond premium when we sell the bond. That's a part of the purchasing process. And we receive a bond premium of approximately $105,000. So we ended up with $105,000 more than we actually had raised in the first place. That's one of the reasons that I'm confident that there would be a minimum of $116,325. And then lastly, the second page to this is a detailed look by year of the principal and interest that's due every year. So this year in the 1920 budget, our total P&I owed is $2,256,000. Our current 1920 budget, and this is the first row at the top, is the $24,133,000. If I assumed that nothing in all future budgets, if the only thing that changed was this debt payment, then what you would see on the second row is there's that $116,325 that it would increase by. That's equivalent to 0.48% increase on the budget. So nearly half a point of the 2021 budget that you're seeing is driven by the increase in principal and interest that's owed. If I keep rolling that forward, though, we start to fall off on our obligation for P&I. And you can see in the year after that, our obligation drops by $242,000. That would reduce the budget, again, if the only thing that changed was the debt payment. It would reduce that budget of the prior year by 1%, and the following year by 2.46, by 2.28. So in the space of the next several years, we're going to see 6+ points of our budget drop off due to the debt repayment cycle. And this is the result of at least a half a dozen different bond issues that have been raised over the last probably 20 some odd years. This is just now the way that the schedule worked out. And you can see the graphical representation of that across the bottom. So one of the reasons that I wanted to bring this detail to you is you see that next year is a bit of an anomaly with the increase of 116K. We have the opportunity to smooth or flatten that curve and then benefit from the downward slope in the years ongoing after that. So I bring that to you now. You can consider that, and we could talk about it further at an upcoming budget workshop.
All right, so thank you. I'll just open it for any clarifying questions again.
So you don't want to talk about this
I
now?
want you can ask any questions that you have for clarification to talk about the workshop.
Okay, so you don't want to talk about this now?
Question? Ask away.
I don't have a question, but I have a position on this, but I guess I will hold it
Save
until
that
the
to the-
budget workshop.
We appreciate it. Thank you. So anyone else have any questions? And the numbers put forward in the options. So again, these are any and all of these we can consider?
Yep.
Everybody's good with all?
I would urge caution.
Just on the debt management, this table with respect, relative, comparing it to just the proposed mix of costs, so to speak. So then, if I'm to understand this schedule over time, then the debt management costs, just by sheer payment, prepayment, or just amortization of the interest, and then the principal goes down, that percentage is going to go down, which conversely, then presumably, if we change nothing in programming, we'll have more programming. Right, okay.
We could also take that money and take it off the principal, though, couldn't we?
Dr. Penn?
The unspent bond proceeds can only be used towards bond interest.
Not principal.
Our bond interest total that's in the 2021 budget is something like $325,000, $350,000. Sizable.
Then if we take all three of these options, we can get ourselves theoretically closer to zero in case other things. Yep.
Well, we're 200 some, any one of these gets you pretty close to zero.